having been in this similar position, you do need to ask those hard questions. You need to be able to present multiple options of, scenarios, to where you will make these cuts. Unfortunately, they are tough decisions. I've had to make those myself, and unfortunately, it's something that needs to be done. I agree with the finance committee for bringing up these issues. I listened to the video a couple times, and I support their decisions to ask those questions. They need to be asked.
Okay. Was there anyone else? Do you see anybody?
Yep, Alan.
I come from a little bit different direction. I spent 18 years on a select board in Essex, and I've spent a bunch of time here. I have always, worked down the road where we would give the budget developers a percentage of cut and whatever, and let them work their magic with respect to the individual items of the budget and where they feel they can get rid of them, because I don't think that, the members of the finance committee or, the members of the board have the technical knowledge of, we can get by with 2 less people at the drop-off center, or we can, get by with, 2 less truck drivers or things like that. And so I've always felt that, if we need to make cuts, you give them a hard bottom line budget to cut to, and let them figure out let the operators figure out how to do it. So that's just my opinion.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Roman.
I would concur with Alan. The staff members, give them a bottom number and let them go with it. I know these times are not as easy as they could be, and there's some anxiety, but I really feel that we have a good staff and that we really should listen to them. I'm probably more optimistic, and so I really liked what I heard as far as what was coming from the staff.
Explain that a little more. What do you mean by what was coming from the staff?
Well, I feel a little foolish here, but just in what their goals were in the first session, I thought their goals were very realistic, in my opinion, and that to look at other alternatives in this stage of the budget process, I thought was maybe a little odious, but I heard a comment about, well, the select board wouldn't like it if this was the thing. We're in the same spot, and I'd like to see optimism that we're going to be going forward, and that the numbers I think are headed in the right direction. And again, if it was reviewed quarterly, we would have a much better handle on it, and it would be, I think, more positive in the overall process.
So do you feel that Attorney Gil Fillin's advice then that there was potential legitimate concern about what they were proposing and how? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, I understand it's a legitimate concern. I just don't know if it should have been pushed back as much as it was in what I heard of the hearings or the tape.
You mean the request for the staff reductions?
Yeah. Yes.
Tim Laux is raising his virtual hand.
Excuse me?
How do we
Who's speaking?
So Leslie has a hand raised, and then I heard Tim.
Who spoke first?
Leslie, feel free.
I think Leslie has frozen, her screen is frozen. So Tim, go ahead.
I guess my first comment is, Michelle, I'm just going to ask, I would appreciate it if, I don't feel that you're characterizing Gil Fillion's memo appropriately at all. You said that she's raised concerns. She didn't raise a concern. She was emphatic, I think, in her endorsement of the approach that the committee and the board takes. Saw a note that there should be no limit on our authority whatsoever. She pointed out that there could be a potential loophole if you construe the executive director's contract and the wording of the personnel policy in a certain way. And in my estimation, I think it was a very small, a very limited possibility. And that's fine. If there's the possibility that those two issues would be combined in the future to go ahead and limit the board's authority, then my recommendation would be let's take steps immediately to go ahead and change that language so that we don't have that problem.
Where?
And I guess my, I understand, I think that, the board and the committee and the staff will be aligned 98.5% of the time. And occasionally there may be an opportunity for a disagreement in the approach. And I understand where Alan and Roman are coming from, saying, gee, we think we should just go ahead and give a number. And I think that the board and the committee both firmly agree that yes, we do need to go ahead and give the staff the autonomy and discretion to go ahead and make their recommendations as they see fit. And we would certainly, and it would be, I think, in very, very rare circumstances when we decided collectively, either as a committee or a board, to overturn those recommendations. However, I think it would be very foolish for the board to go ahead and limit or prescribe our authority in any way in this area, because you've got to consider where we're going to be 20 years from now. We got a rogue general manager who said, gee, we're sitting on $11 million in cash. I have to reduce my budget. I'll just go ahead and take it out of cash reserve. I'm not saying that's legal. I'm just saying those are the issues that we need to think about. We should be taking no steps to prescribe or limit our authority, because it's our responsibility to go ahead and represent our constituents and the residents of our town to run the district.
Thank you. I do want to point out that I'm not making an interpretation of what she's saying. It's actually a quote. And the quote is that there is potential for legitimate concern with how and what the committee has proposed as the changes to the budget. She does go on to say that how those reductions are made would arguably be up to the executive director. Now, I did not ask her for a full legal opinion, and I'm not going to. I wanted her feedback, and her feedback wasn't a clean bill of health on the committee. Certainly, she made it clear that the board can do whatever they want. And I have to say,
Tim,
no,
two things.
Leslie, I'm not done, please. So she, to the credit of the committee, you did come back and give a number. And I think that all's well that ends well, and it did end well. And we'll just continue then. I don't hear any interest in looking back at the instructions that were given by the approval of the functions and process. So we will continue. And I appreciate you all listening to this. I'm very sensitive about having those kinds of discussions particularly so frankly in front of the staff. But we're done, we're moving on, and Sarah has a budget for us for next week. So, Leslie, go ahead.
Yeah, Leslie still had a hand raised. So Leslie, you're hopefully unmuted. No, let's see. Unmute. Okay. Leslie, you're unmuted. Are you unfrozen as well? Leslie, you still look frozen.
Yeah, she's frozen. Yeah. All right, well.
Can I raise my hand again?
Tim is back, yes.
So when Leslie gets unstuck there, if she'd like to make a comment as we move on to the next item here.
Well, then,
Another comment.
yep, Tim had another comment.
Go ahead, Tim.
Michelle, I'm not sure where we're leaving this. So we've spent the district's money to go ahead and get a legal opinion that has been a resounding affirmation of the rights and responsibilities of the committee and the board, but left the door open just a crack. And I guess my feeling, and now you're saying we're just going to move on, even though we've exposed this potential liability that would limit our authority. Why don't we just take steps to go ahead and change the wording in the personnel policy or the future contract to make sure that we don't have a conflict?
Well, we can certainly do that, and that will be something that I would suggest. I did want to get the feedback here, and I think that things could be made clearer on whose authority, because as I understand it, and Sarah, maybe you could help me here with it, we have a very prescribed process before we can let an employee go for, I guess, for various reasons, as you would fire anyone who may not be functioning well. I don't know how we fit and who would decide who goes where with the policy that we've got that is pretty prescriptive. If it was a decision that we needed to cut hours or cut the salaries or let people go, I think we do need a little more clarity on this for everybody's sake. But honestly, I did not hear, other than from two commissioners, an interest in going back. Well, you did, Tim. So that's 3. Anyone else? Anyone think that maybe having some? Yeah, go ahead. I see. Yes. You're muted.
No, go ahead, Paul.
Okay, I'm unmuted. I'm not really sure where we are in this conversation. If the question is it legitimate to go back and ask management to look at staffing levels? If that's what we're talking about here, my comment would be, if you step back and you look at it, if we know that our volumes are down, our revenues are down, presumably that means our workload is down. So I think it is a very legitimate question then to just say, well, if there's less work to do, should we be employing maintaining the same headcount? I'm not presupposing an answer, but I would put that to management. How do you justify maintaining current staffing levels if work volumes are down? And then hear what the answer is and justification, and then make a decision going forward. I think it's a very legitimate question to ask. It is unfortunate that staff has to hear that, but that's the nature of this quasi-public institution that we're all involved in. And they just have to kind of have a thick skin and realize that those questions are going to be asked.
I agree with you. And my concern was trying to hear the justification that went along with it, because the budget that was presented didn't require it. And it seemed that the budget that was presented was superseded with some prescribed solutions to a problem that didn't exist at the moment. Now,
That's your opinion, Michelle.
yes, it is. It is my opinion. Absolutely.
Excuse
So,
me, I'm sorry to interrupt. This is Leslie. Can I
Yes,
just
go ahead.
say, I had to leave the meeting because my screen froze. I was having trouble understanding what people were saying. And now I've dialed in by phone, and I don't understand, if you're on the phone, how you get recognized to speak. Could somebody help me with the process?
well, speak. Speak.
Okay. I think we've probably beaten this particular horse not to death, but hopefully to a renewed, a transformation. I would just like to make 2 points for the benefit of the board. The first is that the instructions or the opinion rendered by the attorney, in my judgment, was made on the basis of an inaccurate representation of the Finance Committee's discussion. At no time did any member of the Finance Committee instruct the executive director about how specifically to change the budget or to what personnel measures to take. That discussion was in the nature of a brainstorming session to explore all avenues, because in the judgment of the members of the Finance Committee, the projections upon which the initial budget was based were overly optimistic. This is a judgment call. Different people can have different views on what this terribly uncertain outlook is going to be. But we could see from what data was available that we had a deficit. We were looking at a deficit of at least $1.2 million. And that had to be addressed. And the initial draft presented to us by the staff seemed to be insufficient to address that gap. Again, based on the words in the charter and all prior meetings of the Finance Committee that this group has participated in, we felt we were fulfilling our responsibilities to the Board of Commissioners and the member towns. With respect to the question of the structure, charge, and objectives of the Finance Committee, I would like to say to the board, and I hope somebody can help me follow up with this. On September 18th, a draft of the charge of the Finance Committee was presented in memo form to the board, or was written as a memo to the Board of Commissioners. The minutes of the Finance Committee meeting for September 11th stated that the draft charge would go to the Executive Board for review. I cannot find any minutes, and it may be that I have insufficient information. I cannot find any minutes where the charge developed by the Finance Committee back in September was ever presented to the Board of Commissioners for discussion. So it looks like that's something that kind of fell through the cracks. I think the committee worked very hard and diligently and very seriously to develop that charge, and I hope there's an opportunity to review it by the full Board of Commissioners.
Unfortunately, I'm sure Amy could answer the question in a heartbeat.
Amy, Amy's here, but I believe that it may not have gone to the executive board, but
I think it went straight to the full board.
straight to the full board, I believe, and it may have been part of a consent agenda. So we will verify that.
I can check.
Yeah,
I-
I couldn't find it.
Okay, we'll find that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So, all that said, I would like to move on now. I still have some concern about the concerns that Attorney Gilfillan had. And I agree with Tim that this could be something to potentially sort out in the future. I think that this organization, we're not heavy on process guidance, and especially for the executive director. I think that has the potential to be problematic, but that'll be for the future. I just have to say this did concern me, that it was so freely went to cutting staff rather than letting Sarah present her options first. And yes, it was a discussion, but in listening to it again several times, I was hard pressed to find where any other specific agenda items for each budget section were identified other than this. So we'll move on out of this, if everyone's okay, and go on to the board norms. Agenda item number 5, I believe.
Correct.
Discussion.
And if you could either raise your hand using the hand raising function, or turn on your video to physically raise your hand.
These are, just to let you know, creating this was the result of the attorney that we had to come and speak to us about the governance, the Robert Rules of Order, the loathsome meeting laws, and this was her recommendation, that we create a process for how we operate.
I have some questions.
Go ahead.
Can you clarify the process that's being in front of us? Is this just discussion only at this point?
Yes.
Okay. I would like to propose some revisions to the document. I have some language changes that I would recommend that would be easiest in a markup. And then other items that probably are greater discussion, potentially where it'll clean up some ambiguity and other elements that may be a bit overly subjective.
Can you clarify any of them now?
Sure. If there's other folks that want to speak, I'm happy to offer that opportunity and go later.
Go ahead, Bryn. You have the floor.
Okay. I am trying to pull up my notes at the moment, so bear with me. I think there's some general structural things. It'd be great. I appreciate having the authority included in the document at the end. If it could, again, it's well, for me it's a little nitpicky, but just either moving it to the front of the document or referencing that their endnotes would be great.
Okay. That's easy.
Yeah, that's pretty easy. I had some questions about the general organization section. I was curious about item number 4. The Board of Commissioners shall have the authority to establish any and all committees as it may deem necessary. That seemed a bit broad, and it didn't really clarify how those committees were appointed or how many members were on them, if the chair needed to be part of it, if staff needed to be part of it, or if that was captured, if the drafter of the document just presumed that would be referenced in the charter or other authorizing documents.
That is from the charter. That's the exact wording of the charter.
Okay, I think there's opportunity for clarification there.
Okay, so that could be part of adding the endnote process here.
Yep.
To identify what sections of this are simply charter language that we're just obligated to.
Right. So given that this document is allowed to create clarity, is there opportunity to define the scope similar to number 3 of like how many members are on the committee or how that's appointed?
Which is are you talking about the finance committee?
No. So I'm wondering if there could be clarity to item number 4 in a similar way that there's clarity on item number 3 in terms of how many members are part of it.
Are you in the general organization?
May I, Bryn and Michelle, I have a more a general suggestion about this document and the kinds of concerns Bryn may have and others may have. May I have a moment to present this idea?
Well, Britain had the floor, so
Yeah, I'm happy to yield. I don't want to take up people's valuable time right now.
Well, your time is valuable too. But okay, if you're yielding the floor, go ahead.
So in looking at this thing, this document, it occurred to me that the district has a bit of a challenge in that right now our governance is rooted solely in the charter. And that can only be changed or amended by going to the legislature. And so as a result, our charter is now nearly 20 years old. I think that the district, certainly the Board of Commissioners, would benefit enormously if we could craft bylaws. And this kind of document is exactly the kind of thing that would get wrapped into development of bylaws and the kinds of issues that Bryn has just identified, where on page 2, item number 4 is very general, item number 3 is very specific. The commissioners as a group may decide that they would like more specificity for something like item number 4. Those kinds of conversations or kinds of issues, in my suggestion, would be very well addressed through the process of developing bylaws.
Well, Leslie, I've got to say that I agree with you, and actually, this was the recommended first step towards the bylaws. That the attorney suggested that we start with operating norms that are just the basic practice that we have of operating our meetings, and that these sections actually have rather general statements to them that do lead the flexibility that you're talking about to become more specific in a set of true bylaws. So this is kind of could be thought of as the introduction to establishing bylaws. Most of this is either the result of simply requoting the charter or the result of various legal opinions that the organization has collected over the years, and the practices that are required by Robert's Rules of Order. There's pretty much nothing in here that is just kind of an arbitrary refinement.
Well, the reason I gave Bryn's example is that simply listing language from the charter may not be sufficient. Now,
Well,
every organization that I've been associated with that went through a bylaw creation process established a small committee that worked on it and then brought it back to the full board or, you know, appropriate governing body for, you know, adoption through a, you know, a proper process at a warned meeting. And I'm suggesting that that would be the best way to go forward with this. We can't go to a meeting with 18 people and everybody try to chime in and do wordsmithing or flag 17 different clauses that need better development than what we've got. So I'm asking the board to consider whether perhaps at the June organization meeting, the board create, maybe from volunteers, maybe saying, well, we have to have one person from the executive board and one person from the ad hoc committee and one person from maybe the finance committee if the finance committee is going to be specified, or whatever it might be. You know, it's up to appoint a group and give them 2 months to get together and meet separately from the meeting to work up a draft that can be presented at a warned board meeting, a draft bylaw.
That's a great idea, Leslie. What was recommended, because I don't think that many of these commissioners come to the board meetings and have the charter with them, and they don't have Robert's Rules of Order on their desk. What was recommended was that there be a very general document that pulled all of the kind of very high level behavioral and procedural processes into this starting document. This is just what the charter says. It's what Robert's Rules of Order says. It's nothing special. It's nothing new. This is just kind of like an index of our already prescribed behaviors so that we all can see them and understand them during a meeting in a much simpler form than having to have the, 40 pages of the charter and the entire Robert's Rules of Order with you. This is just kind of high level functional. I really would like this board to consider having this document as a desktop meeting guide. You know, there's nothing in here that is new. There's nothing in here that isn't already required of our behavior and our structure and our organization. So I'd like Bryn to come back in, and maybe Bryn, you could discuss a few more of your ideas.
Sure. I think having that clarity is really helpful. So thank you. I think my comments would probably be better if I knew if they were specifically referenced from the charter or if they like if there were specific sections that were all entirely from the charter, or if there were sections that were in addition to create operating norms, just to save time and be efficient.
Sure, that can be done. I can do that. And then get this back out to the board again.
Yeah, that may help. I know that it would help me a lot. I would appreciate that. Thank you.
I think that's a good idea. I think it's actually, I think it's probably essential and something that I shouldn't have overlooked in kind of specifying, so where did this come from? Why does that say, where does that say that?
Yeah, I guess I was surprised that item number 4 was taken from the charter without any additional direction. So that's good context for me.
Okay. All right.
I'm going to leave it at that for now.
So how does the rest of you feel about having kind of this desktop guide for you? Any comments?
Roman?
Yeah, basically, I read it and I thought that it was a really good overview of behaviors in a meeting. It's something that the Select Board of Huntington had developed 4 or 5 years ago, and it's it's maybe lacking detail. I mean, in the particular one talking about committees, I mean, you can never know what kind of committee you're going to be applying, pulling together as a select person. So I didn't really thought that was needed much more detail than what it gave us permission to make committees. And then, there may be process about if we're going to do a committee, then we might want to have, a process on how we select the members. And I mean, I know that Huntington has that as far as part of our procedures, but it fell out of an overview document like this.
Yes, and that's exactly what I'm thinking here, is that this would be the overview document that would end up rolling out into bylaws, as Leslie says. So, this is, here's the topic, and then another one, this is specifically how you do it. So thank you. I agree. I saw another hand in there.
Yep. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, Michelle, you just said what I would, in a sense, what I was going to say. I think the suggestion to have develop a set of bylaws is excellent and very much needed. So if this was a starting point and an interim document, but not an ending point and not a final document, then I think it's generally, it's good to endorse this and follow these practices until such time as a fully developed set of bylaws can be developed and approved by the board. That said, I have a few specifics. I don't know if it's right now appropriate to get into them. Specific comments. My concern mostly was about the role of alternates, and having been an alternate and then graduated to the full commissioner level, this document seems to me to say that an alternate at a meeting really can't voice an opinion or ask a question unless it's directed or channeled through the commissioner, who may also be present. And I think that's probably diminishes the role and the value of an alternate. I think they should be allowed to speak to the meeting during the meeting and ask a question, certainly not make a motion, not vote on a motion, but we want to develop and cultivate future board full commissioners. We want to hear all the different points of view that we can. I would say it's up to the chair. If an alternate is holding the floor too long or dominating the meeting, maybe put that person, bring them back to order and move the discussion on. But I would like to see alternates have a little more standing at the table at a regular board meeting.
Well, that comes out of the legal opinion that was written about the alternates. And one of the concerns that's stated, and I did put a reference to it in the authorities here, maybe I should have been more specific, was the concern that it, just as she says, that you can't have a regular commissioner and the alternate both with the ability to vote, because they may nullify each other. And you may have an alternate who is, in this case, you may have an alternate that's wants to debate the other side of the issue that the commissioner has. The solution would be that the commissioner and the alternate are going to have some kind of communication, and that the alternate, who is actually the representative, the commissioner, who is the actual representative of the town, can certainly request the floor for the alternate to speak. It was my hope to give the commissioner a bit of a say over what might be said by the alternate that could be contrary to what the commissioner wants to have represented for the town. That was the purpose there. So, I think that you have to think about, I'm sure that we all get along with alternates. That might not always be the case.
I have a different question.
Yeah.
So on page 2, under general organization of the board, item number 6, it says all communications between board members and staff will comply with the Vermont open meeting law.
Yes.
Now, I'm not an expert on the Vermont open meeting law, but that statement seems to be extremely broad.
Not if
when
you
you say all communications.
What that means, Leslie, is that what can't happen is like what has been happening with the Finance Committee. When there is an opinion discussion on an agenda item that's being CC'd to all. That's what this means, that all communications between board members must, for example, a bunch of you could meet at a picnic. You can't even start talking at that picnic about CSWD business.
Well, actually, my understanding is that if the two people meeting to talk do not constitute a quorum of the board, then the open meeting law does not apply.
Right. So you would not be.
And I'm also informed
that the meeting law.
I'm also informed that at least in Burlington, I don't know about other towns, it is common practice for members of committees created by the city council to meet independently of warned meetings and kick around ideas.
They're violating the open meeting law. This is
I have a legal, this was told to me by a lawyer who served on the council for many, many years.
Well, Leslie,
and said it's actually not well defined. It is not definitive. And all I'm saying is we as a board can choose, how we want to, whether we want to impose quorum requirements on meetings of 2 board members.
Sarah, could I have your assistance here?
Yeah, I would.
This is pretty clear cut, Leslie.
Yeah, I would refer everyone back to the training that we had several months ago from Attorney Nicole Mace, where she reviewed the open meetings law and the requirements, and it is very prescriptive. It's quite clear that particularly if a quorum does exist, if you are again at a picnic and by chance a quorum of any of the committees, so it could be a quorum of the Finance Committee or Exec Board or a full board exists, business should not be discussed. Um,
Sarah, we're trying to address a situation where there is no quorum.
Then it's not a problem.
Right.
If there's no. quorum,
Oh,
it's
okay,
not a problem.
okay, all right. Fine, all right.
Any other comments? So, not hearing anything else.
Actually, sorry,
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Paul. Sorry.
I would like to speak in favor of what Paul said. I guess us Pauls are sticking together tonight. But I mean, when I do like giving alternates a chance to speak, I certainly understand that you don't really want two different representatives from the same town arguing the different points of view. However, sometimes that can actually be beneficial too, as long as it's clear that only the primary has the actual vote, of course. So, but I do believe it's up to the chair. The chair has a prerogative, I believe, to potentially at some point cut off comment from the alternate if the chair feels the alternate is straying too far. So that's my point on that. I always felt like it's good to encourage participation by the alternates because it's just good to have that extra point of view. So.
Well, I've observed that with the exception of one town, that the alternates have sat with the commissioner, and I'm going to use Bryn as an example. That when she and the alternate are there, I've seen them discussing, and then the alternate has spoken out. I think that's fine. I feel comfortable that they're maybe on the same page there, but that hasn't been always the case, and it can be abused, having a right to speak as a non-commissioner. I think is a little problematic. This has generally been adhered to. So I'll let this stand and see what happens when we come to a revision of this, and we just move on.
Michelle Allen had his hand up.
Alan, go ahead.
I always use and I'm going to identify towns here, but I've always used the Heinsberg model as an ideal commissioner alternate situation where Lynn and Doug sit side by each, and they discuss the issues between themselves, and then Lynn brings it to the floor. We theoretically, as members of the board, are representatives of our towns and thereby representatives of our select boards. And we need to carry forward what the select board's desires and wants are. And you can't have two commissioners presenting two different views on a subject. And so I think that matter of fact, I brought it up 6 or 7 years ago to Paul, or maybe it was quite that long ago. When Jericho changed their members and Burke became the alternate, and there have been times when he has had a contrary opinion to what Leslie has spoken to before that, and that should not be happening in my, in my thoughts. So I just, think we need to do something just so that the chair has a route by which to handle the meeting. But Paul's comment, the first Paul, his comment about trying to train members and have them come to the meetings and understand what the board is very important. And so I agree that they should be there, Paul. But so that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Anyone else? Are we all set on this? I see a hand. I can't quite tell who. Sarah, do you see?
I don't. I'm sorry. If you could, if
I think it was Duncan. Is it Duncan?
Duncan's down there. I don't know if Duncan
I think
wants.
he's muted.
Oh, there he is.
I've seen similar situation in our town meetings in Bolton. And they have a process called segregating your voters. In other words, you still have people at the meeting speaking their thoughts or whatever, but the people that are actually voting on it are separate from them. So the chair can recognize who is voting and who's supposed to be voting. And I think we may need to go to this in our meetings if this, if there are problems with alternates trying to vote on stuff when they're by our bylaws aren't supposed to be, or our charter.
You're right, Duncan. That I know of at least one occasion when that has occurred.
Quick comment.
Yes, Bryn.
It is certainly difficult in the remote meeting capacity that we have currently and without ability to know when that will end. But isn't it the case that our name tags indicate alternate?
Yes, and I know who the alternate is as opposed to the commissioner. So that my being able to identify who is who isn't such a problem. It is like this, actually, hearing just a voice. But this is a little bit different, and it was just meant as a way to keep, and this was at the suggestion of the attorney, as a way to keep the alternate and the opinion of the alternate not to conflict with the commissioner, just as the votes potentially could.
Sure, I understand the reasoning that topic has come up. I see value in having the commissioner and the alternate not have to be sitting apart from each other. It makes it more difficult to be on the same page.
Yes, but I'm not suggesting that they have to sit next to each other, but they have to at least be communicating, and that the commissioner, who really has the right to get the attention of the chair, should simply just get my attention and say, the alternate wants to speak. That way I know that, you're happy, you're comfortable with what they are or what they're going to say. It's as simple as that. It's not going to be denying anybody. It's just kind of having a regular process of who's what on this board so that it becomes a habit to the thought. Any other discussion? Did we lose everybody?
All set, Michelle.
All of a sudden, there it is. My screen went blank there, and everybody was muted. So is there anyone else who would like to make any comment on this, have any suggestions on how we move forward, what else you want to see here, what this should look like? Lee? Lee, any thoughts? Since it seems like Burlington, you guys go around just meeting anywhere?
Yeah, that's news to me. I mean, and maybe a little more clarity on that. you know, the quorum, if it is, say, like our TOOC committee is 3 members, you know, what constitutes a quorum and can they have that conversation? I don't know. I don't know who they were talking about that used to be on city council or a committee, but yeah, I don't have any input on that as far as the city of Burlington. As far as the alternate, I don't believe that they're necessarily being silenced. I mean, they always seem to have the opportunity to speak, the ones that I've seen there. And it does state, you know, public comment as well, that, you know, they aren't being silenced, I don't believe.
Okay. And maybe Leslie can give you some guidance on what your
Yeah.
what the committees
Let
are
me know
doing.
who that was. I'll make a couple phone calls.
Okay, I think we're done with this. I appreciate this feedback. I will get some clarity into where these statements come from, and I want you to understand that this is kind of a desktop cheat sheet to Robert's Rules of Order, our practices, and the parts of the charter that directly control a meeting setting. And that this is intended to build on to bylaws, that because we do need more specificity. Are we good here? Well,
Yeah.
thank you. Go ahead, Bryn.
Nope, yep, all good.
Okay. Okay.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
I think Dan even, did Dan from the Compost Center vote aye?
You may have.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Aye.
Night.